Welcome everyone. My name is Asma James. I'm a journalist from Freetown, Sierra Leone, and also a girls' rights activist. I will have the pleasure of moderating this very, very important occasion. As I've told you, I'm a girls' rights activist. I believe in education for girls, and so that is why we are all here today. As we all know, in the lead up to the International Women's Day 2021, education definitely cannot wait. The Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies and the UN Girls Education Initiative are launching a new core resource package promoting gender-responsive and inclusive education intervention in emergency and protected crisis settings, the EiE-GenKit. To celebrate the launch of this new resource, we'll start with a short film screening, followed by a panel discussion with gender and EiE practitioners, experts, activists from all around the world. Thank you to everyone who've been able to join us for this launch of the EiE-GenKit. Please, I would like you to introduce yourself in the chat box. Tell us where you're from and why gender responsive education in emergency is so important to you. Also, a reminder that this event is available in French, Portuguese, and Arabic, in addition to English. Don't forget to select your preferred language for this event. As we all know, the incidents in Nigeria, I believe we are all glad that the girls are back. It is important to protect our girls' rights to education, and I'm happy that these girls are back. So let's remember them. As you know, some will be traumatized. It's not an easy journey for them, but we are grateful that they are back and we continue to pray for them. So having said that, let's now have a video. This video will be available after the event for those watching to go back and deliver deeper into the EiE-GenKit to understand why it was created and how it fills an important gap in resources for gender and education in emergency programs. I will now introduce the first speaker, Nora Files. Nora was instrumental in making the EiE-GenKit available to us all, and so we are pleased to hear her reflection on developing this all-important resource. Over to you, my dear Nora.
Thank you, Asma, and I think we're now going to see the film before I speak.
Okay.
When we are out there in armed conflict situations, in situations of refugees who have fled across the borders of the countries, or internally displaced who are within the borders of the country, or children and youth affected by climate-induced disasters. When we are out there, we see that those left furthest behind are often the girls and adolescent girls. Prior to COVID-19, they counted 39 million girls and adolescent girls whose access to education or equality education had been disrupted because of this crisis and the forced displacement. And today that number has increased. It's actually estimated that 50% of refugee girls may not return to school ever due to COVID-19. To understand all of the complexity, we need to have the right research, the right standards, and the toolkit that brings together awareness and can sensitize all practitioners who are out there to always be observant and to tailor and target their programming and the delivery to ensure that girls and adolescent girls and exposed boys have the full mechanism, the whole of child approach for protection. I am therefore very happy on behalf of Education Cannot Wait to be here today as we launched the GenKit that has been developed together with our partners, INEE and UNGEI, together with several dozens of partners out there in the field who are practitioners and who understand the realities on the ground. And with this toolkit, the GEN toolkit, we look forward to work with the United Nations, with civil society, with strategic donor partners, with host governments, with communities and local civil society to roll out a greater understanding and commitment and ability to make sure that we provide the best possible scenario or environment for girls and adolescent girls, as well as for boys, to thrive in an environment of learning, even if they are caught in a crisis.
When there is an emergency, education is often one of the first rights to be lost to vulnerable children. And as with all losses to vulnerable children, they are not equal. Yet education and emergency approaches often do not provide the gender-specific tools, the gender-specific knowledge, and the gender-specific techniques that we need to address these challenges for girls in humanitarian situations. Hence, this GenKit. This GenKit was developed after conducting extensive research and speaking to many, many actors on the ground. This is not a manual. It is a set of checklists. It is suggested outlines for pedagogy and curricula that can be implemented immediately. Education plays a key role in redefining gender norms in any situation, but especially in humanitarian situations, where a good education that is gender transformative can break cycles of violence and promote tolerance and reconciliation. We must harness this potential and ensure that all learners of all genders are able to contribute equally and positively to their community's recovery as a cornerstone of sustainable peace and development.
like any other sectors, gender equality integration is paramount, and EIE sector is no exception. Why? There are many critical reasons, and one of them is the eloquent sex and age disaggregated data, which tell us about the millions of girls and boys who are denied education, particularly because of gender norms, such as prioritization of boys' education over girls, particularly in poor families with limited resources, domestic responsibilities, issues like marriage, menstruation, or early pregnancy, or unsafe learning environments. So when you add poverty to gender equality, then to being refugees or risk-based, and COVID, you can imagine the vulnerability, particularly for an adolescent girl or young woman living in such context.
The refugee context is compounded by the fact that most refugees come from countries where education has completely collapsed. And unless they are provided a lot of support, they eventually do not enroll. The other issue is there are also harmful traditional practices. Issues like FGM still happen in the refugee camps. Issues like early marriage still happen in camps. Issues like early pregnancies happen in camps, and those girls eventually drop out.
One of those specific barriers is social income, because we see young girls who are part of low-income communities are always being sent to go to work instead of going to school, or sometimes are being supported to marry in young age, because that's kind of like a form of an income when girls get married and their husband is kind of like responsible of the family of that girl.
Menstruation is another barrier that is limiting girls to have access to education. Girls are not being taught about their menstrual cycle and are not provided with menstrual hygiene products, and because of this, they tend to drop out of school.
Emergency exacerbated or GBV, and then the pre-existing gender inequality. So it really, in emergency, GBV just become our huge problems. And it's not just that women and girls experiences it, but it also hinders women and girls' access to different services, including education.
Emergency is not a monolith, and we always need to be mindful of the type of emergencies we are, of the duration, etc. And our gender equality response should largely depend on the crisis context.
So in order to have an informed, appropriate education and emergency plan, we need to be very careful in the need assessment and analysis to identify those needs that relate to gender specific components. And after that, using those evidence to generate and to develop appropriate plan that include those gender aspects and factor. Regarding these very important work, need assessment and analysis, and the gender element, I feel that working with different cluster or education and emergency coordination group, there is still some lack of capacity to really take into account these elements.
I think capacity building is critical. It's important, very important. So in Plan International, what we are doing in Uganda and South Sudan is to strengthen capacity of education in emergency practitioners to help them understand and apply the EiE-GenKit tools on the job within their current multi-year response programming.
One of the interventions we support in those contexts includes capacity building for refugee and host community teachers. In the refugee context, we also support the training of lead teachers leading to certification. When we have large classes that will require somebody to support the teacher to manage, then we prioritize girls who have gone through grade 8 or grade 11. They normally will not qualify for a teaching course. So we put them in class to support the teacher in management of the class. And then with the time, they begin to slowly, gradually acquire some teaching skills, some classroom management skills. And then they gradually also are transitioned into assistant teachers. Now, when we go into recruiting for teachers to be enrolled into the training program, we prioritize these assistant teachers. That has also helped to increase the number of female teachers getting into the teaching profession.
In our organization, we really wanted to give a platform for young women to advocate for issues they care about and issues that impact them, and also like how we could help them to organize either policy change, an educational system where most of those communities who send their girls to work instead of sending them to the school, they understand the long-term impact of girls being out of school and how even like keeping girls in school is economically benefiting from them. So that education is also one of the important things.
Now, with the onset of COVID, what we found is that all of Nigeria, for the first time, was faced with the exact same situation that the Northeast has endured for years. All children had now this barrier of access to education with the federally mandated school closures as a response to the COVID pandemic. What came out of it was the recording of the SUBEB, which is the State Universal Board of Education certified curriculum, on to radio programming. These radio programs were then aired in the morning on an agenda that was publicly available, and essentially school went on to the radio. The next step further, which was even more interesting, was that these were then recorded. And as these curriculums and subjects being taught were recorded, they were stored in essentially a non-formal library of courses, and we're able to distribute that on USB keys, and children who are perhaps still not able to reach radio access learning programs, they now have the option to use solar-powered radios and USB keys to play their radio learning at their convenience. The impact this has had on girls' education is that during school closures, the domestic burden was incredibly high on the girl children, disproportionately high. Girl children were not available to learn during the hours that these recordings were normally provided. Now, with the pre-recorded USB keys, facilitators were able to come into the communities and run groups of girls' radio learning clubs at the hours that were convenient to the girls. So these facilitation groups, while they were reaching all children, unanticipatedly meant that there was a safe space on an accurate schedule for the girls' domestic chores to engage in state-run curriculum for formal learning in a new and innovative way.
Using advocacy as my strength, I've been able to raise awareness on the issues that these girls have been faced with. I've also been campaigning for the government to reduce tax on menstrual hygiene products so that girls can have easy access to them. I've also been working with local communities to educate mothers, daughters, families about the importance of going back to school.
In my opinion, those tool resources can really help practitioners, and in particularly from my perspective, cluster and other education and emergency coordination group, to think and include the gender elements throughout the humanitarian program cycle.
Indeed, there is a range of rich education in emergencies and gender tools out there. They are available globally. They are across our organization, our different organizations. They can be sometimes challenging to access or too technical or not detailed enough. But I think the added value of EiE-GenKit is that it builds on many of these tools to respond to the needs to better equip education and emergencies actors with practical advice, very practical advice to enhance their interventions so that they become more gender responsive and inclusive.
Education is one of the most effective forces and strong forces to transform negative gender norms to positive ones to end gender-based violence. And education is also like a passport for future. So it's extremely important that both boys and girls can have equal access to education, even in emergencies.
Education for children in emergencies needs to be gender responsive because all children have a right to education.
So what can help to transform this story is gender equality integration to education, within education, and through education. To education, just ensuring that there is equal access, closing gender disparities in all education-related indicators, but also through education, meaning using the power of education to address social norms, to transform attitudes, and also to advance the agency of women and girls beyond the education system. So I think, therefore, integrating gender equality in EIE programming is just a question of high quality programming. It's a question of high impact and sustainability. It's just the smart thing to do.
Crisis presents an opportunity to transform education systems, to adapt curriculum and teaching practices, as well as reveal new approaches to redress gender imbalances in education. It is therefore critical that education initiatives adopt a gender lens and implement strategies that address negative gender and social norms, that they promote gender equitable practices, and ensure that all learners are reached. The Education in Emergencies Gender Kit provides tools to help address the specific barriers to education associated with gender, together with factors like poverty, age, disability, ethnicity, language, and location. The tools include practical guidance on how to adapt and tailor education in emergencies programs and their delivery across a range of crisis contexts. These are aligned to the INEE minimum standards for education and the INEE guidance note on gender. Sustainability is a cornerstone of the EiE-GenKit. It can be used to strengthen gender capacity across processes, across systems and actors, all working on education in crisis and conflict. INEE members have a crucial role to play in disseminating and promoting the uptake of these tools. We encourage all of you to use the EiE-GenKit to ensure that your interventions and response, that they are safe, equitable, and gender responsive. Now is the time to leverage the power of education in emergencies. We must commit to leave no one behind.
Oh, this is a well-loaded video. Many thanks to all those who contributed in that video. I'll now introduce our first speaker, Nora Fives. Nora was instrumental in making this EiE-GenKit available to us all, and so we are pleased to hear her reflection on developing this important resource. Over to you, Nora, and just before you speak, Nora is the former, should I say was former head of UNGEI Secretariat. Over to you, Nora.
Thank you very much, Asma. You're right to say this is a pretty loaded video. We need to watch it 2 or 3 times to absorb all the richness of that message. I am really pleased to be with you today. 2 days out of being the head of Secretariat for UNGEI, and it has been my great pleasure to support this project towards today's launch of the GenKit. We set out some years ago, first of all, to help create a new version of the Pocket Guide, the INEE Pocket Guide that was launched over 10 years ago as a practical resource to address some of the interests and concerns and needs that were expressed to us just now in that video. But we set out to say, okay, what else is out there? How do we make sure that the practitioners facing the day-to-day concerns, they're busy people, they said, make it simple, make it practical, give us something in our hands that we can deal with these issues which are pressing, which are demanding, and are ever-changing depending on the crisis and the context. Give us something that draws on all the experience and research from the humanitarian end of crisis right through to development, sustainable development, and make this gender rich so we can bring that lens to everything we do. So with extreme outreach and speaking to, can't tell you, not only those many people on that video, but many others in the field and experts and practitioners in the field. We listened to them and said, okay, how do we put together something which can really help you with your work? The product is the EiE-GenKit. And it is a celebration, again, of many networks and actors coming together. UNGEI stepped up and said, we will facilitate this work, and we will do this with the leads in the area, INEE and ECW, so that we collectively owned by this community to address ongoing specific and pressing needs. I have to say that it has been quite an extremely important commitment, not only to work in English, but to reach out to all parts of the world where crisis is ongoing and a concern, because gender presents itself and gender inequality presents itself just as crisis presents itself differently in every context. And we needed to be enriched by that expertise and understanding in order to effectively reflect that. Now, today, the GenKit is available in English only, but our translators are busily putting together the versions in other languages, and this will be a resource to all practitioners. I must say that we've invested quite significant amount of time, resources, and expertise, UNGEI, ECW, and INEE, and so many other colleagues and experts, and we want to just celebrate the importance and the extremely useful value of this resource in this time, where we know that crisis is immediately around us and one step ahead and just behind. We are presently and always in this space of conflict and crisis, and this will help us in our work to bring that gender lens to all things education. The last thing I want to say is because of the increased need, attention to gender in education, in conflict and crisis, we see the development of more tools and resources, and this is complementary to these other resources, such as the newly released UNICEF resource called Reimagining Girls' Education, which really puts a laser lens on what's it mean to be doing this at a distance. What does distance education offer to this area of conflict and crisis, and bringing gender into that distance education? So with that, Asma, I'd like to pass it back to you, and thank you all to be here today and to contribute your voice and your experience and help us celebrate the launch of the GenKit. Over to you, Asma, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Nora. Very, very loaded explanation there too. Thank you again, Nora. We want to start our panel discussion, and we want to hear from young activists and UN and EIE practitioners on how they are working to overcome gender inequalities in education in emergency settings. We've heard from some of the panelists during the video, so it's a chance to dig deeper into their work as well, to hear from some of new gender and EIE advocates and experts. As always, please use the chat feature to ask questions and share your comments, which we'll try to work into the program. My first guest is Nafisa Nafissatsu, is a gender equality advisor for Plan International. In the video, we've heard about the specific barriers to education and increased vulnerability experienced by adolescent girls in crisis-affected context. Now to you, Nafisa. Can you tell us about some promising strategies that Plan has implemented to address these?
Thank you, Asma, for this great question. I'm very excited to be here today, and thank you to UNGEI and all the contributors to the video. It's really very inspiring So I think I would like to start by reiterating an important information we heard from the video, which is the importance of adapting responses to the crisis context, adapting responses to the types of emergencies we are in, whether it is a rapid onset or it is a protracted crisis. And also, very importantly, the importance of adapting the responses to the unique and intersecting needs of girls and boys in that particular context. Keeping particularly in mind that there are different age groups involved, there are different capacities within those groups, and it is very important that we, in our approach, in our responses and intervention, we adapt to those needs. So in Plan International, our approach to address case-specific barriers to education is a gender transformative approach, which is very mindful of the different capacities of the different groups, which is very mindful of the issues of agency of adolescents, girls, and particularly when we are in a context of protracted crisis. So what happened within that type of gender programming, we work with education stakeholders to strengthen the education system to make it more gender responsive. But at the same time, simultaneously, we work with local partners, with families, with communities and adolescents themselves, first to strengthen their agency, and second, to ensure that we have a positive family and community environment that can help address those specific barriers. And it can be through engagement of local leaders, of religious leaders, of women leaders, of men, etc. So the strategies that I would like to share today is, and which help really to addressing those barriers, and which help to bringing to light the vulnerabilities faced by adolescent girls, is the Girls Education Movement Clubs that Plan International has implemented in Uganda. I'm sure you are familiar with other types of children groups and clubs out there, but I think the specificity of the Girls Education Movement Clubs is that it brings together adolescents, girls, regularly to discuss about their rights, about gender equality, menstrual hygiene, or gender-based violence. At the same time, they promote the importance of education with the goal of keeping girls in school. And I think what was important also is that the Girls Education Movement Clubs were very successful in carrying out peer-to-peer education in order to reach to out-of-school children and to support their entry or re-entry into the education system, which is very important. I think what I would like to highlight is that originally the clubs were solely made up of girls, but we noticed that boys' voices interest in joining, and now we have really mixed-sex girls education movement clubs, where sessions are held separately for boys, for girls, and then afterwards the group come together to discuss issues as a group. So I think it's very interesting to note that as a very important way to empower adolescents, to put them at the center, to bring light into their own vulnerabilities. But what I would like to conclude with is the important aspect that happen after these club members grow up, because the most important thing is also the sensitization sessions they carry out within their schools, within their communities, using theater, using dance, but also, very importantly, the intergenerational dialogues that they support with parents and communities. And these intergenerational dialogues are my second promising strategies that I wanted to share, because it's a really effective and promising strategy that gives space to adolescents and parents to discuss barriers and vulnerabilities. And it will really help also parents to get a deeper understanding of these issues, of these barriers, and support them to develop further sensitization, further awareness raising to other groups of parents, but particularly to take action. And I think that are the two promising strategies that I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you very much, Nafissatsu, for that experience. My next question is to Hawa Yoki. Hawa is the co-founder of Africa Girls Empathy and Youth Ambassador for Plan International, Sierra Leone. Now, however, especially in crisis-affected settings where services are disrupted, youth-led networks play a critical role in providing peer-to-peer support to girls and bridging the gap between bigger INGOs and communities. Now, can you tell us about your experience promoting girls' menstrual education in Sierra Leone and why youth networks are so well positioned to do this work?
Thank you so much, Auntie Asma, and I want to thank UNGEI for the opportunity to speak about these things. Research has shown that 1 out of 10 girls tend to miss their periods because of lack of menstrual education. And experiencing menstrual pain and discomfort is considered to have a negative effect on girls, both in attendance and participation in class. Mostly when girls are on their period, they are forced to stay at home because of lack of maintenance, lack of menstrual hygiene product, fear of menstrual accident whenever they go to school. So it is very important for girls that are in school to learn about their menstrual period. Also, in most times, the social norm that is affecting girls when they're on their period tends to make them not to go to school. That is why the African Girls Empathy, we have come up with the menstrual education, the menstrual education project, which encourages and teaches girls about their menstrual cycle. It is also doing this has also given me the opportunity to learn that it is very easy for girls to speak to their peers about menstrual hygiene instead of speaking to parents or teachers. That is why it is very important for youth organizations to support youth organizations in achieving this. Also, it is very important for us to have a menstrual education curriculum in our schools, because this will help girls to understand more about their menstrual periods, more about their menstrual cycle, more about how to take care of themselves. Because one of the things that is currently affecting girls to go to school is because the issue around teenage pregnancy. And when a girl knows about her period or how to take care of herself, or during and after their period, it is very important for us to address this issue. And even in as much as the First Lady has been going school to school and distributing menstrual sanitary product, it is very important. It is very important for us to have menstrual education curriculum, so that these girls can understand about their periods and can know how to take care of themselves in order to be able to combat sexual infections when they're on their periods. Thank you.
Menstrual curriculum in schools is very important. Thank you so much, Hawa, for your contribution. And my third panelist is called Naomi, founder of Cinema Law Foundation in Nigeria. Gender-based violence serves as a barrier to education for many learners in crisis-affected contexts, and girls in particular. Can you tell us about your work through the Cinema Law Foundation to address issues of gender-based violence in northeastern Nigeria? Naomi?
Good day. Thank you so much, Asma, for the question. And thank you to UNGEI for the opportunity to be on this panel today. I really appreciate it. I'm from Nigeria, and for so many years, we've had crises due to insurgents, due to banditry, and religious crises generally. And there has been several cases of attacks, so many bomb blasts, and most of the time, women and girls are affected by these situations. We've had, for instance, the recent situation of the abduction of about 300 girls in Katsina. Gratefully, they have been returned, but we've had these situations or these kinds of things reoccurring. And there has been so many cases of girls suffering from these insurgents. Well, our work in Cinema Law Foundation, I currently run an organization called the Cinema Law Foundation, and we work to provide access to quality education for young people and children, especially surviving victims of violence. And we concentrate a lot on girls' education, because one thing we believe is that when you educate a girl, like it's generally said, you educate an entire community. And for most of these victims of violence, female victims of violence from northern region of Nigeria, most times we've realized that they actually came from backgrounds that had little access to education. And then over time, they now go into these situations where they do not have access to any form of education later on after these violent conflicts. And one thing that has been very clear from our experience is that a traumatized person is a potential violent person. And if we are to break the circle of violence, we need to focus on providing access to education for those who have suffered from gender-based violence in order to prevent future occurrences. If we don't provide access to these ones, then we know that there's going to be a continuous circle. So we focus on post-conflict intervention and also preventing violent occurrences from happening again, or rather preventing violent extremism. And we've had, for example, we've had situations where we meet some of these girls. To be specific, we had a particular situation where we met a set of twins, and then at an internally displaced camp. And for the first moment when they had escaped from violence and all that, they couldn't speak. They were heavily traumatized. But after they started going through our programs, our arts programs, educational programs and all that, these girls became vibrant again. And few years later, the impact on their lives was very clear. So that for us is, for the past 7 years now, we've been carrying out this project, and that for us is a continuous work until we see an end to gender-based violence in northern Nigeria. So this is something we've been on for a while, but we still have a long way to go. We still have a very long way to go. We work with so many youths in Nigeria, and we're working to ensure that there is consistent education and skills acquisition for girls and young people who have suffered from violence to break the circle of gender-based violence. Thank you. Thank you, Asma. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Naomi Epoki, founder of the Cinema Law Foundation in Nigeria. You're doing a great job in Nigeria. Thank you so much. Amani is my next is my next panelist, and she is a youth activist and member of the Generation Equality Youth Task Force from Palestine. And now COVID has had a huge impact on education in context already experiencing conflicts or instability. It is truly crisis within crisis. Can you tell us about how COVID has done existing situation in Palestine with regards to girls' safety rights and access to education?
Thank you, Asma. Thank you, everyone, for this amazing efforts. And it's really a topic that is hugely needed to be covered, because in many of the analysis that are being done about the implications of COVID, the issue of conflict, the intersectionality, and the exacerbation of the implication of and the impact of the crisis is not being addressed enough. So we really need like these platforms, these spaces to speak up and to elevate the voices of unheard, especially women, young women and girls also. So as you mentioned, Asma, even prior to the COVID crisis and prior to the outbreak of COVID-19 in Palestine, the country was already affected by like a protracted humanitarian protection crisis due to the ongoing Israeli occupation here. And especially also with a blockade on Gaza Strip, that maybe many people, they are not really familiar with the context there, but it's really important also to highlight the complexity of the situation there. So the combined effect of the lockdown measures, the movement restrictions, the socioeconomic implications, the school closures or remote schooling, and the lack of recreational spaces translated into highly stressed families confined in relatively small places with an unexpected, with an expected impact on the prevalence of violence in households. So Palestinian schools were affected by the ongoing occupation already in the West Bank and in Gaza, and this created a coercive environment of many Palestinian communities affected by further access restrictions, attacks on schools, and other interferences with access to education, including dismantling of education infrastructure. So this was of particular concern in the West Bank for children living in Area C, that falls under the authority of the occupation forces, and the East Jerusalem H2 area and the seam zones. And I'm also talking about Bedouin communities, marginalized Bedouin communities that already they don't even have education facilities. The kids there, they don't have access to schools or education facilities at all. So in these areas, the children could not access school safely due to the risk of being arrested along the way or due to the risk of attacks on school. The exacerbation also led to the COVID outbreak also had implication not only on the girls and the children, but also on women themselves as mothers, because we don't have a ready infrastructure to absorb or to deal with the newly introduced online education. And given the fact that in many communities they don't have access to electricity, they don't have internet connection, and many families also, especially after the outbreak of COVID, they are now poor families. They lost their sources of income, so they cannot afford even the required devices, learning devices like smartphone or tablet or computers for their children. And this whole responsibility is left for women to deal with, especially living in a very patriarchal patriarchal society where women bear the lion's share of caregiving and teaching the children and doing the house care and everything. And this is a new burden for them also to deal with, and to also help their children to deal with online education.
Thank you, Amani. Thank you very much. I'll now introduce our final panelist, Robin, who is a UNICEF education specialist based in northern Nigeria. In the video, we saw that in northeastern Nigeria, the video learning innovation in response to the COVID-19 situation was very successful in reaching girls in particular. What challenges and opportunities did you see for girls' education and technology in crisis-affected settings?
Hi there. Thank you very much. I appreciate very much the chance to be a part of this very rich panel. It's so interesting to listen to everybody's perspectives on this. I just have to say that very much like was introduced at the beginning, the relevance of the EiE-GenKit is its power. And what I found with the COVID-19 response in northeastern Nigeria was that discussion around relevance of response. Radio is the most available mechanism through which the learning could continue and access could be ensured. And so expanding on relevant technologies for increasing access to education has to be our focus going forward. Now, speaking of opportunities and challenges, the biggest challenge right now, other than the basic logistical ones, radio doesn't reach everywhere. Not everyone has a radio. Electricity, even here in Borno right now, has been wiped out by the armed opposition groups for the last month. It's a very challenging context in which to ensure a continuity of learning. However, the innovation around this has been amazing. So the opportunities are that solar-powered radios are being put in the hands of teachers and facilitators around the Bay States, the northeast of Nigeria. The opportunities are to advocate for continued funding so that we can expand on the radio learning curriculum that has been very much supported by the state to be put on air. The recording, as I mentioned in the video, the recording of these lessons and downloading them onto USB keys and distributing these lessons out into the field has been the largest win, because as the children are using solar-powered radios and plugging those USB keys in to sit down and learn their lessons, they're doing it at a time that is convenient for them. And as all of you are aware, girls and women have forever had the unfair domestic burden on their shoulders. And what we've seen with girls' attrition from education has been, as they age and as they have this much higher opportunity cost of attending school, we see them leaving classes. With this radio learning program, we're now able to allow for girls to group together at their convenience at a time that works for them to follow a state-run curriculum on their own. Future work, of course, needs to continue to make sure that we can keep going with this program. We can develop further curriculum, add in new elements, but primarily is to ensure that this learning is recognized by the state so that they can pass exams. So we're in early days here in northeastern Nigeria in terms of seeing this and seeing this play out. But I think the largest takeaway we have is we need donors to understand that the gains made over COVID-19 school closures in radio learning cannot be lost. We have access and tapped into a capacity to reach girls in an unprecedented way, and it is culturally relevant and it is accessible, and it's got to continue. Thank you, Asma.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you very much. Let me bring in Naomi again. In crisis-affected settings, technology is an important tool to deliver education. However, learning about technology, including STEM subjects and digital skill building, is also critical for girls' future and peace building. So from your experience, how can exposure to technology through education support peace building efforts and empower women and girls? Naomi?
Right, thank you, Asma. And I really appreciate Robin's the information Robin gave on digital learning and radio learning. Because personally, I can testify to digital learning because I'm currently an engineer. I have an engineering background, and I must say that I am the first. I'm somebody who has benefited from it, as someone who grew up in northern Nigeria and has experienced violence in northern Nigeria. So we cannot underestimate the value that STEM education, that science, technology, engineering, and math education delivers to young girls. When I work in my organization, as we talk to young people, as we talk to young girls, we make it very important to them by teaching them skills in computer, in artificial intelligence. We run STEM boot camps to expose girls to digital learning because there are very few role models. Personally, where I grew up, I could barely see any. I could only see those on TV, and most of them were white. I mean, people, not women of our color. Sorry to bring, but yeah, from my background, there were very few girls that had that kind of exposure to digital learning or to see female engineers. All we saw were movies, in American movies, in European movies. So now we want girls to see us, to see the girls in their community who have come up to become engineers or doctors and things like that, and then get them exposed to digital learning. For instance, there were times we had curfews growing up due to violence. We had lockdowns. Lockdowns didn't start for us today. It started a long time ago. And we had to learn on TV and on computer. Thankfully for parents who are educated, but a lot of the children who are exposed to violence in these local communities do not have access to computers. As an organization currently, we're building a block of classrooms where we're inculcating a STEM lab, where we're going to be teaching girls how to program, to code, and to learn through computers, because technology is the is the language of the 21st century, and it's impossible to demarcate it from their learning. Right now, most of us, during the lockdown, we've been learning through computers. How about those in refugee camps? How about those who have been out of school for a while and do not have access to these computers? So it has become a major project for us, and it should be a major project for everyone. Permit me to conclude by saying that peace building, digital learning, you don't have to have a degree in peace and security or in conflict studies to engage in these things. You can be an engineer, you can be in whatever field of study and help those who have been exposed to violence get digital learning and access to peace building. And I'm really grateful for the work that is being done on radio learning. Personally, as an organization, we're also trying to do as much as we can to expose victims of violence to digital learning, especially girls, because it's very important. I am a testament. Growing up in Northern Nigeria, I can testify to the impact digital learning has had on me. And it's going to be so helpful and beneficial to so many girls in conflict-affected areas all around the world. So it's something that we all have to be involved in. Thank you so much, and back to you, Asma. Sorry, I get passionate about these things sometimes, and I'm trying to.
I can understand. Great panelists. Many thanks to all those who worked hard to get these panelists. I think I'm also enjoying the program here as we go along. Let me bring in Hawa. As we all know, a critical issue that is generating the exacerbating humanitarian crisis and limiting girls' educational opportunity is climate change. Leveraging renewable energy and climate resilience is really important in terms of preventing or mitigating crisis situations and protecting our environment. However, why is girls' education important for climate justice, and how is your organization helping to improve these situations?
Thank you so much, Asma. I think the issue of climate change is really important, especially for us here in Sierra Leone. This is something that we have not really spoke about, or we're not talking about, and we can see that it is affecting us every day. Looking at one of the barriers that is actually affecting girls is the lack of energy. Energy is a great resource for girls to be able to use in order to further their education. And when you look at Sierra Leone, this is something that is lacking, especially for girls in the rural community. Girls are finding it very hard to be able to access energy or light for them to study at night. And most of the time, you can see that because of lack of energy, because of no electricity in a particular community, girls are either raped because there's no security for them, for it to guide them when they're going to school or when they're coming to school, and this is when they are coming from school, and this is like very, very important. And also, when you look at the climate change, girls are the most affected, because when you look at drought, girls are the ones that are sent at night to fetch water. And when you look at climate education, girls are not really taught. Our curriculum here in Sierra Leone have not really been moving towards climate change or climate justice. So the issue of having renewable energy in our schools, in our environment, in our homes is very, very, and it's really important. Here at African Girls Empathy, we are providing energy for girls to at school and at their houses, so they can be able to have access to study at night. Another issue regarding climate change is providing eco-friendly schools, because when they go to school, they need water to drink. When they go to school, they need to have access to technology. When they go to school, they need to have access to things that they don't really have access to at home. They need to use the internet, and because of the renewable energy structure, renewable energy project that we are providing schools with, girls can now easily be able to access these things to learn about climate change, learn about climate justice, to learn about how climate change is affecting them, or how to prevent themselves during natural disasters during climate change disasters that are caused. So for me, it is very, very much important for us to learn, or to encourage our girls to learn about climate change and how it affects them, and how we can move from using things that are destroying our environment to using renewable energy material, renewable energy resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Hawa. Let me bring in Robin. Robin, we've had some interesting insights about how the Girls Radio Learning Club's intervention came about, and also the impact it had on ensuring continued learning relevant to the COVID-19 context, but also crisis context more broadly. How might this shape future education response from a gender perspective in northern eastern Nigeria?
Thank you, Asma. I just want to say as well, I think I'm going to go look up all of you ladies after this and befriend all of you, because you're inspiring in the stories you're sharing. I'm sitting here cheering. With regards to developments for education post-COVID in northeastern Nigeria, we have effectively unlocked very quickly and unanticipatedly with the COVID-19 funding that came in, a modality that works, a modality that doesn't challenge social norms in a way that renders access to education inaccessible for girls. We've found a way to work around the current schedules and the current availability of girls. And while I hope to see this expand, I intend to see it expand, there's a few other interesting things happening. I've noticed just in my own time going into here in Borno, we have IDP camps. And when I'm going around the radio learning clubs, trying to assess what's working and what's not, and with our local partners, really talking about what's working for the facilitators, the female facilitators that are leading the groups, the girls that are attending, I'm starting to notice there's actually an incredible range of ages showing up to these classes. Now, bear in mind, in Nigeria, there is no second curriculum. There is no non-formal curriculum. It is the state-run curriculum. So when these programs were recorded and broadcast, and then are now shared in the radio clubs, this is the official state learning curriculum. We now have older women, young mothers, women who've left school are now coming back to these radio clubs because they are such a safe space, because they are female-led, and because they are available at the times that the 12 girls in the group decide works for them. So we're seeing a reach that we didn't anticipate, and we're also seeing an opportunity to develop further content that is of relevance to these demographics. So of course, with COVID and the onset of school closures, we had to very quickly put together something basic. And what we managed was the full basic curriculum, years 1 to 6. We have workbooks that have been successfully produced. Even since the time I did this interview with Emily and Gloria originally, we now have student workbooks that have been state approved and very much promoted. We're doing teacher training now. Teacher training is being recorded by master trainers that are state-run trainers and being recorded and sent out on tablets, which are also solar powered for teachers. We're looking at how we can provide a full learning experience and a full support to the student, to the teacher, no matter how advanced an education that teacher may have, and to a broad range of women. Of course, we're running boys programs now as well in the second iteration, but I think looking at what implications this has for access to education in northeastern Nigeria, where every conflict, education is the direct target, not an indirect target. It is the direct target in this context. We have found a way to build something relevant and accessible. And I couldn't be more proud of our local partners putting in all these hours, because people have been going nonstop around the clock to put it in place, but continuously learn from it and improve upon it. So let's hope to see continued donor funding so we can keep this going. And I am certain it will grow in great ways in the next year, if not 6 months. Thank you.
Okay. I pray for more funding, Robin. Thank you very much.
We all do.
Okay. My next question is to you, Amani. Amani, so what do you think is the role of young women and girls in peace building, and how can their work be better supported by the global community?
Yeah, this is a very important topic, especially that we're talking about crisis context and conflict context also. And being coming from a country that still is under occupation, it like I know what it means to be like a young activist, a young woman activist and human rights defender, especially amidst the COVID crisis and its political, also economic and social implications on ground. So young women are often subject to double marginalization, like as I mentioned, as a woman and as young people. And therefore they experience different kind of exclusion on all level, and not only in policy making level, but also political participation, social participation also, and leading the efforts in the crisis, leading the efforts of the crisis context. So systematic and representative inclusion of women, especially young women, in a broad range of peace and security issues is not only important to promote peace and to achieve reconciliation as the context in Palestine, but also to ensure that their interests, their priorities, and their needs are being addressed. So women, they better know about their priorities and needs and their demands, and it's always important, and it's always a necessity to have them at the table, being part of these negotiations, being part of leading the efforts on peace and security. And related, regarding the pandemic, so the COVID pandemic has deepened and magnified the issues that the WPS agenda seeks to address. And much attention has been called to the increasing plight of women and girls and the need for intervention. And it is often women peace builders, especially young women, who are in the front lines addressing these issues in different variety of ways. And I can also build on my experience working with the Global Resilience Fund that targeted mainly young women and girls in different contexts in the world, specifically marginalized contexts and marginalized countries and areas. I could see the passion and the energies that young women and girls have in not only in implementing but also designing for the interventions and setting the priorities for their communities, for their societies also. And they did really amazing, magnificent efforts also to respond to the implications, different kind of implications of the COVID crisis, whether it's like providing humanitarian aid, providing social services, also providing, helping out the girls in their communities to have access to information, access to education, access to health, and also many different aspects. So one area like that women peace builders, especially young women peace builders, have been working is in providing access to information and healthcare, humanitarian aid, social services, as I mentioned. So the pandemic is highlighting the barriers that exist for marginalized groups, including, of course, young women, to access such resources. And young women peace builders are on the ground, identifying and often experiencing these barriers. And as I mentioned before, also the fact that these human rights defenders, young women, are operating and are doing their activism in such a patriarchal system, it also puts another layer of oppression on them and contribute to shrinking the existing or shrink spaces available for them to do their activism. And we all know that the pandemic has also deprived women and girls from access to justice as well, because of the breakdown of official institutions, of the courts and the judicial institutions. So they were not able to seek their, they were not able to have access to justice. They were not provided with the needed protection because of the lack of services and the lack of resources, and also because all of the shifts and supports were directed towards humanitarian response rather than service provision and capacity building. So despite the range of work that young women peace builders are carrying out during this pandemic, it's often missing from assessment of conflict zone in COVID-19 area, and overlooked by national and international actors. So that's why I emphasize on the importance of such event since the beginning, because it would strengthen the national capacities for sustainable peace and development, because it will also elevate the voices of these young women and girls, not only in the national level but also international level. And I would also I would conclude by saying that it was a remarkable, like 2020 was a remarkable year in terms of the inclusion of young women and girls in the international platforms. And I would like to highlight the Generation Equality Forum that also opened the opportunity and offered an opportunity and opened the space to initiate the intergenerational dialogue through which these young women and girls could convey their messages and their asks to the international community. And I hope there would be more monitoring and accountability mechanisms that would eventually change the reality and situation of young women and girls on ground for better. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Amani. And let me bring in Nafissatsu. Nafissatsu, Amani has spoken about the importance of the participation of women and girls in peace building. What are some of the ways in which gender-responsive education intervention in crisis solution can contribute to peace building?
Thanks, Asma, for this great question. And I agree with Amani about the important role of youth, particularly women and girls in that journey regarding peace building. And I would like also to echo Naomi's point when she emphasized that anyone has a role to play in peace building efforts. And gender-responsive interventions provide really great opportunities. I think we all know that environments in crisis generally, there are many types of tensions and pressures in those type of crises, and they are also reflected in people's daily life at home. Those tensions are present in schools, in classrooms, etc. And when we apply some types of gender-responsive approaches to education, particularly when I think about teachers' training on gender-responsive pedagogy or the specific measures to prevent and respond to gender-based violence, I think these are important. There are important elements of peace buildings in this type of approaches. Just to give an example, when we implement gender-responsive pedagogy, gender-responsive pedagogy training for teachers, I think we can expect a safer and more positive learning environment for all students, including positive approach to discipline, etc. And we believe that this can really increase the opportunity for students themselves to see conflict and manage conflict in a more peaceful way, to use nonviolent communication skills, and all these elements are very important for preventing conflict and building peace and in a daily life. And I think during a gender-responsive pedagogy training, when you really address about some norms that can help prevent violence, etc., I think teachers can use those skills can learn very important skills that they can use in their own life and in their own homes as well. So, and I think we can have also other type of interventions. For instance, in West Africa, as part of our education and crisis programs, we developed for girls and boys group some life skills programs. And those programs are strongly aligned with peace education methodology. It means that it includes some important skills to help them dealing with this conflict in daily life, to give them skills, knowledge, and capacity to manage conflict in a healthy way and to find solutions accordingly. And I think these life skills programs are excellent opportunity to not only raise awareness on gender inequality issues, but also to build capacity of girls and boys in peace education, for them to promote peace building in their communities, etc. And it is the same, I think, when we engage parents or communities on rights to education, when we engage families on gender-based violence. And I think during this engagement, there are big opportunities to discuss peace building. And yeah, these are just some key elements I wanted to highlight on how applying a gender-responsive interventions can lead to greater impact, including peace building efforts. But I want to conclude by saying that this looks easy, but at the same time, it's very difficult to implement. All that to say that capacity building, again, is critical. It is key. This journey is not easy. There is a lot to learn on the road, on the way. And I would really encourage everyone to deep dive on the EiE-GenKit, to take the support of a gender expert to help to understand, to be familiar with the tools. I think it's really important, actually. The momentum is here to improve girls, to unleash really girls' potential. I think girls around the world are counting on us, particularly girls living in a crisis-affected context. It's not only girls, it's also about all vulnerable children. It's also about girls and boys facing some intersecting vulnerabilities such as disability, facing poverty, girls who are married, young mothers, etc. I think it's the time now, and the GenKit provides us really great opportunity. Thanks, Asma.
Oh, thank you, Nafissatsu. Thank you very much. Thank you to our inspirational and powerful panel, and for their commitment to advancing gender equality in education in crisis-affected settings. We are grateful for your work and your dedication, and we are grateful for your time today to support the launch of the EiE-GenKit. I will now invite our final speaker, who is Sumaya Toa, a master's student and co-founder of the Dosti Initiative from Afghanistan, to share some closing reflection from today's event.
Yeah, thank you so much, Asma, and thank you so much, everyone, for such an inspiring panel. It was really inspiring to hear Hawa, Amani, Naomi, and Nafisa and Robin share the work that they're doing. My work is actually very much between the intersections of many things that have been mentioned. So and in order to share the work that I'm doing, it's important to understand my story and where I come from and where I am today. So currently I am a Master of Public Policy student at the University of Oxford as the first Rhodes Scholar from Afghanistan. And this would have not been possible if I did not have the opportunity to keep continuing the education that I received through opportunities that came about. My family is from Afghanistan, so I was born in Kabul, Afghanistan. But due to the war and imprisonment that my father faced, and due to the rise of Taliban, my family decided to move to Peshawar, Pakistan. So I grew up in Peshawar, Pakistan as a refugee. And one of the main challenges that I faced my entire life was continuing my education. As a refugee in Pakistan, as an Afghan refugee, we didn't have any legal status or documentation that could allow me to go to public schools. So it was very, very difficult for my family to find ways and means to allow me to go to school. And even when I was able to finally get access to school, there's so many different barriers I faced, whether that was language barrier, cultural differences, discrimination based on my identity, being called Chinese, Japanese in class because I didn't look like my classmates, but also my teachers judging me based on my identity, but not on my merit, was something that I faced until I was 16. When I turned 16, I realized that there are so many girls like me who are either displaced, or there's so many girls in Afghanistan, many inspiring women in Afghanistan. Whenever I used to go visit Afghanistan over breaks for short term to go see my family members or see some of my friends, I would see that there's so much potential in so many girls who have the potential to do so many great things, like Hawa, Amani, Naomi, who have started these great initiatives, that it was important that I find a place, a safe space, and a safe school setting that would provide me the opportunity to find my full potential and have my own voice and be the person I am today. And I was fortunate that after I spent months looking for opportunities, and I came across this international boarding school that was looking for Afghan students and also refugees. And I was so grateful that the criteria included refugee students, Afghans living in neighboring countries, because if it hadn't, I would have not been able to get the opportunity either, because being a refugee, your identity just becomes so complex. And once I was able to apply, during the selection process, I actually met someone who has inspired my lifelong journey of actually advancing education to many girls. And her name is Dr. Roshan Thomas. So she is a Canadian doctor. She was a Canadian doctor who came to Afghanistan to do my selection process. And the day I met her, she urged many of us who had come to take the exams to continue their education abroad, that we should come back and help rebuild Afghanistan, but also work to give access to many displaced Afghans and Afghan diaspora across the world, access to education. And those words really stuck with me. And unfortunately, after one day of taking the exam, she was shot in the same hotel where I had met her and I'd taken the exam. So she sacrificed her life in order for me and many other young girls to be able to go and continue the education. And as I speak about her, it just makes me very emotional to think about Dr. Thomas and the sacrifice she made. I just want to resonate that in this conversation and in this panel, the sacrifice and the efforts behind making education accessible and inclusive and equitable for so many girls. And it takes so many women and also men who are putting efforts every day and night to make it accessible. And by getting that opportunity, I was able to go abroad to United States, do high school. I have now 2 bachelors in economics and peace and global studies. And now I'm at Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar studying. And this would have not been possible if I had not gotten the support and if I had not gotten support from people who believed in the power of educating young girls and educating young girls who come from conflict settings, who come from crisis situations, who come from communities where they face gender-based violence or issues that have to do with anything that prevents them from being able to go to school. And I would want to just touch upon that. That has inspired my work, and I co-founded Dosti Initiative, which is which focuses on educating girls about menstrual hygiene and connecting young girls across borders, but also encourages girls and empowers girls to have conversations about how they can be peace builders within their communities. And this initiative is operating in Afghanistan. We have 4 student clubs in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where we've been virtually connecting girls through the student clubs. They learn how to make their own menstrual reusable sanitary pads for menstruation. And they also keep in touch with one another. And the most impactful part of this project has been, in my opinion, just empowering girls to have those conversations, to be able to openly talk about what it's like to be a girl in settings like that, and what are the issues that they face. And a lot of these issues have been highlighted on this panel today. And before I end my remark, and after sharing this story, I just want to give a quick message that I think is very important and want to call for action. Our entire community to not to use this kit that's being provided by UN Girls Education, UNGEI, but also to find other ways within our communities to empower girls. So from my own personal experience, it was being able to go to school abroad, in an international boarding school abroad, provided me the opportunity to learn my full potential. But I think we can build such opportunities locally within these settings and build safe spaces for these girls to be able to receive education, to feel safe, to have their voice, to realize their full potential, and to know that they have the right to an education, and they have the right to be themselves. And I hope through launch of this gender kit, EiE-GenKit, that UNGEI is working on, that many girls can access similar opportunities like me, and not have to leave their home countries, and not have to be displaced, and not have to go through other barriers to receive education. So I'm very grateful for everyone who's here, and for sharing their insight. And it has truly been an honor just listening the work that everyone has been doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Maya. Inspiring story. Your story is powerful. And I want to say thank you to all of you. We look forward to seeing you all make use of the EiE-GenKit. I hope you're feeling inspired from today's conversation. Many thanks to UNGEI, ECW, and INEE for organizing this event, and to everyone who joined in from around the world. I am so grateful to have hosted this session. I'm forever grateful to the organizers. Thank you, stay safe, and goodbye for now.
Thank you.